On a damp, bone-chilling winter evening in a densely packed neighborhood of Shanghai, a young man named Alysa Liu stood at a precipice. It was not a physical cliff, but a temporal one. A crossroads that would forever cleave his existence into two unequal opposing halves, the life before departure and the life after courage. The air around him was heavy, tasting of coal smoke from 1,000 heating stoves and the metallic tang of impending rain. The sounds of the city, the rattle of bicycle chains, the shouting of vendors, the murmur of families behind thin walls, formed a symphony of familiarity. Behind him lay everything he had ever known, the cadence of his mother tongue, the weight of thousands of years of history, and the specific comforting geography of his memories. Ahead of him lay the United States. It was less a place on a map, and more a terrifying abstraction, an uncertainty wrapped in the fragile, shimmering gauze of hope. He gripped the handle of a single suitcase. The leather was worn at the corners, scuffed by a life that felt small. Inside were meager possessions, but beneath his ribs, burning with the intensity of a fever, was a conviction so fierce it frightened him. He did not simply want to leave a place, he wanted to transform a soul. Arthur had grown up in an environment where destiny was treated as an assignment, a dossier handed down by the state, by lineage, by circumstance. But as he matured, reading books by candlelight and listening to forbidden radio frequencies, he began to suspect that destiny was not received, but seized. The political pressure was a physical weight. The limited freedoms tightened around his ambitions like a constrictor snake. He dreamed of studying law, not to enforce the will of the powerful, but to defend the voices that trembled in courtrooms. He dreamed of a future defined by the exhilaration of choice rather than the dull ache of fear. So he left. It was not a departure of cinematic explosions or tearful public farewells. It was done quietly, with the stealth of the desperate, the way most truly brave decisions are made in the shadows. When he arrived in the United States, the silence was the first thing to assault him. It was a different frequency of silence than he knew, not the hushed caution of political restriction, but the vast echoing void of not yet belonging. The sky seemed too big, the streets too wide. He struggled profoundly with English. The language was a fortress, its grammar a maze, its idioms traps. Sentences felt like puzzles he had to solve in real time, while people waited impatiently. He took jobs that rendered him invisible. He washed dishes in the back of steam-filled kitchens, until the skin on his fingers wrinkled and cracked. He carried heavy crates of produce until his back throbbed with a rhythmic, dull pain. He counted every coin, rationing food, living in spaces that were little more than closets. Some nights, staring at a ceiling stained with water, he questioned whether hope was a durable enough fuel. But he discovered that hope, when forged in the fire of discipline, hardens into resilience. He enrolled in a community college, grappling with textbooks late into the night. Then he clawed his way into law school in California. He studied with a terrifying obsession, devouring case law as though knowledge were oxygen and he was drowning. Professors began to notice him, not for his social grace, but for the intensity burning in his eyes. He graduated, passed the bar exam on his first agonizing attempt, and slowly built a legal career. Clients, often immigrants themselves, respected his meticulous preparation. Colleagues admired his refusal to surrender. The immigrant who had once slept in a borrowed room was now standing in courtrooms, speaking with the thundering authority of the law. Yet professional ambition could not silence a quieter, more primal longing: fatherhood. Arthur, who had defied the expectations of his homeland, did not wait for tradition to grant him permission to have a family. He chose surrogacy, determined to construct a family founded on deliberate, ferocious love. On August 8, 2005, in a hospital in Clovis, California, the world shifted on its axis again. He held his daughter for the first time. She was impossibly small, a bundle of heat and potential. Her tiny fingers curled instinctively around his thumb, anchoring him to the earth. He named her Alysa. In that sterile room, beneath the hum of medical machines, he felt a new chapter begin, one more significant than any legal victory or border crossed. Alysa grew up in a home filled with books and quiet discipline. Arthur read to her nightly, not just fairy tales but stories of perseverance, biographies of leaders who walked through fire, tales of distant lands. She was a child of kinetic energy, curious and endlessly in motion. She would spin in circles across the living room rug until the world blurred and she collapsed, laughing at the dizziness. Movement was her first language. Words were secondary. One gray afternoon when she was 5, Arthur took her to a local ice rink, simply to kill a few hours on a weekend. The air inside was crisp, smelling of shaved ice and refrigeration. Alysa stepped onto the ice cautiously, gripping the barrier with small, determined hands. She fell almost immediately. Arthur flinched, instinctively moving to rush to her aid. But before he could take a step, she was already pushing herself up. She didn't cry. She looked at the ice as if it were a puzzle to be solved. She tried again. Wobble, slide, crash. Then, something clicked. For a brief, suspended second, she glided. It was not graceful. Her knees were knobby, her arms flailing, but it was free. The sound she made, a bright ringing laugh, pierced the ambient noise of the rink. In that instant, watching her, Arthur felt the subtle, terrifying click of destiny aligning. The lessons began. At first they were modest, once a week, but coaches immediately noticed her unusual center of gravity and her fearlessness. Most children hesitated before a spin. Alysa attacked it. She was small, compact and quick to rotate. By 7, she was landing jumps that startled the parents watching from the sidelines. By 10, her routines possessed a complexity that belonged to someone much older. Training reshaped the architecture of their lives. Mornings began in the pitch black of 4 a.m. Arthur would brew strong coffee while Alysa, eyes still heavy with sleep, tied her skates with fingers stiff from the cold. He drove her through the silent, fog-draped streets, the only car on the road. While she practiced scales and edges, he sat in the freezing metal bleachers, working remotely, legal briefs spread over his lap, his breath visible in the air. He watched her fall thousands of times. He saw her hit the ice with bone-jarring force. His heart clenched every single time, a father's instinct screaming to protect her. But he stayed seated. She always rose. Falling, he realized, was not failure. It was her education. Competitions followed in a blur. First, the small regional events with medals made of tin and polite applause. Then the larger arenas, the blinding lights, the sharp scrutiny of national judges. Alysa learned to transmute her nerves into rocket fuel. Her programs grew more intricate. She chased difficulty like a hunter, mastering triple jumps and ambitious combinations. When she attempted elements that veterans shied away from, the commentators began to use a heavy, dangerous word, prodigy. At 13, she stepped into the national spotlight. The arena buzzed with electricity. She looked impossibly young, her cheeks still round with baby fat. But when the music started, her posture transformed. She became a titan in miniature. She attacked every element with startling precision. The crowd gasped as she landed her final combination. When the scores flashed, history buckled. She was the youngest national champion in American figure skating history. Arthur sat in the stands and wept, his tears hot against the cold air. But triumph casts long, dark shadows. With the title came fame, and with fame came scrutiny. Every practice session felt observed. Headlines speculated about the Olympics, about world dominance, about records she hadn't yet broken. Sponsors called. Documentarians followed. Alysa smiled for the cameras, gave the polite answers she was trained to give. But at night she stared at the dark ceiling, replaying the single scuff of a blade, the 1 degree of tilt she had missed. The expectations tightened like a corset around her ribs. She trained harder, punishing her body. Minor injuries began to accumulate. Chronic inflammation in her ankles, a hip that ached before rain, the wear and tear of a machine run at maximum capacity. Arthur monitored it all, fiercely protective, yet trapped by the knowledge that greatness requires sacrifice. In 2022, she walked onto the vast stage of the Winter Olympics in Beijing. The symbolism was staggering. The daughter of the man who fled this country for freedom was now returning as an American star. The arena was a cavern of spectacle. Flags waved, the world watched. Her performances were courageous, gritty, and technically proficient, but they were not joyful. She fought for every landing. When the competition ended, she felt pride. Yes, but it was mixed with an exhaustion so deep it felt cellular. The dream she had chased since childhood had materialized, and in doing so, it had revealed its immense weight. Months later, she stunned the sporting world. She announced her retirement. She was 16. Critics called it a waste. They said she was walking away from medals not yet minted. But Alysa's voice was steady. She wanted to breathe without being measured by a panel of judges. She wanted to go to school. She wanted to find out who Alysa was when she wasn't rotating in the air. Arthur supported her, though the silence that followed was jarring. The rink, once the center of their universe, faded into memory. University life offered Alysa the gift of anonymity. She sat in lecture halls, laughed in dorm rooms, discovered philosophy and art. She learned that she had value even when she was standing still. For the first time, she felt light. But you cannot kill a love that deep. You can only bury it. Absence sharpened her affection. Occasionally, she would drive to a local rink late at night. Under the hum of the fluorescent lights, she would lace up her old battered skates. She moved without choreography, without a score. The ice remembered her. Muscle memory resurfaced like an old friend. The glide felt different now. Less desperate, more intimate. One evening, seeing her reflection in the dark glass of the boards, she realized the truth. She no longer feared skating. She no longer skated to prove she was worthy of love. She skated because it felt like the truth. In 2024, she began structured training again. This time, the terms were hers. It was a deliberate return. She balanced academics and athletics. She prioritized her health over the spectacle of difficulty. Her coaches noted a new maturity. She wasn't a soldier following orders anymore. She was an artist collaborating on a vision. She selected music that reflected introspection, replacing the bombastic scores of her youth with something haunting and real. The road back was not a straight line. It was jagged. Early competitions exposed rust. Jumps popped into singles. Timing faltered. The critics resurfaced, whispering that she was a has-been at 19. But Alysa responded with patience. Each setback was just data, refining her resolve. Arthur watched from the stands again, his hair now threaded with gray, his heart swelling with a different kind of pride. She had chosen this pain freely. By the 2026 season, the whispers changed tone. Could she do it? Could she reclaim the top step? The World Championship approached like a reckoning. In the final practice, she skated alone in the dimmed arena. She thought of her father on that rooftop in China. She thought of the 5-year-old girl laughing after a fall. She inhaled deeply, letting gratitude displace the fear. Competition day. The lights blazed white-hot. Cameras hovered like mechanical birds. She stepped onto the ice in a costume that was understated, elegant. When the opening notes of her short program began, a supernatural calm descended on her. Her first jump, a triple axel, soared. It was huge, drifting, and she landed on a deep, quiet edge. The crowd murmured. The second jump was secure. Her spins accelerated into a blur, perfectly centered. She left the ice in first place. The free skate would decide everything. Waiting behind the curtain, she pressed her palms together to stop the trembling. She caught Arthur's eye in the stands. No words were needed. A lifetime of 4 a.m. drives and silent sacrifices passed between them in a glance. The music began, expansive, cinematic. Her choreography unfolded like a confession. The jumps rose and settled with authority. A complex combination drew a roar from the seats. Midway through, she felt a flicker of imbalance, a reminder of gravity. But she fought for the landing, correcting in midair with fierce core strength. In the final seconds, she poured her soul into a choreographic sequence that blurred the line between sport and art. When the music ended, silence hung for a heartbeat, a vacuum in the universe, before the arena erupted. The waiting for the scores was an eternity. Then the numbers appeared. World Champion, 2026. She covered her face, overwhelmed. Tears cut tracks through her makeup. Standing on the podium, feeling the weight of the gold medal against her chest, she realized this was not just triumph. It was completion. The journey from an immigrant's desperate hope to a global title had curved through doubt, burnout, rediscovery, and return. Arthur stood below, clapping until his hands stung, his face wet with tears. Later, in a quiet concrete corridor away from the media frenzy, they embraced. He held the woman who was once the child he rocked to sleep. He remembered the young man with the suitcase. She remembered the girl on the wobbly skates. Their stories were braided together, sacrifice and joy, departure and arrival. That night, alone in her hotel room, Alysa placed the medal on the table. It glowed softly in the lamplight. She understood now that victory was not a single moment frozen in time. It was a continuum. It was every fall endured, every risk taken, every pause honored. The girl who once skated to meet the world's heavy expectations had become a woman who skated simply to express her truth. And somewhere beneath layers of time and geography, a suitcase once carried across an ocean by a frightened young man seemed, at long last, to be light.